Palestine update. Ceasefire is now ended and they have started bombing the south of Gaza called Khan Yunis. This is exceptionally bad because they told everyone from the north to evacuate and go into the south, and now they are bombing the south. There are more than 100 casualties just from today's restart of the bombardments again. This is very deliberate because you told everyone to go from the north to the south in the past 6 weeks, and then you start bombing the south. Where the hell do you expect these people to go? Palestine updates for the day. The death toll is now at 15,200 people with 40,000 people wounded. 70% of the death toll is women and children. Muslim leaders from 6 battleground states in the U.S. have pledged to work against Joe Biden's presidency. #Abandon Joe Biden campaign is spanning across different states like Arizona, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and more. Israel also dropped leaflets this morning in the Khan Yunis province telling people to evacuate and leave. The only problem is that people have nowhere to go. More than 50 attacks have also happened in the province of Khan Yunis after the leaflets were dropped. Israelis are now protesting against Netanyahu again in both Tel Aviv and in front of one of his villas. Protests are not for the lives of Palestinian people, but for his lack of effort to bring back Israeli hostages. Palestine updates for the day. In the past 24 hours, more than 700 Palestinians have been killed. According to the United Nations, no hospitals in the northern region of the Gaza Strip can operate on patients anymore. Today, 60% of the hospitals in the Gaza Strip are not functioning. Before October 7th, every single day, 500 humanitarian aid trucks would enter into the Gaza Strip. Only 100 entered in through the Strip today. U.S. National Security spokesperson John Kirby said that Israel is making an effort to protect civilians in the Gaza Strip. Given that 700 died in the past 24 hours, I'm not sure how much weight that holds. Palestine updates for the day. The death toll is now at 15,899 people. Israeli forces killed a 33-year-old man in the occupied West Bank. It was during a raid at the Qalandia refugee camp. Since October 7th, about 1.9 million people have been displaced in the Gaza Strip. The population of the Gaza Strip is a little over 2 million, so by that statistic, it means that most people who live in the Gaza Strip are now displaced. Gaza's main telecom service, Paltel, has said that most of their internet services have been down. This means that internet in Gaza City and the northern part of the Strip is down, which means that the videos that we've been getting, the pictures, the Instagram posts may be delayed because they don't have access to internet. Palestine updates for today. A lot happened yesterday, so buckle up. Israeli troops are now engaged in ground combat in Khan Yunis, as well as dropping carpet bombs all night. Khan Yunis is located in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. A lot of people went from the north to the south in the last month because of the Israeli forces telling them to evacuate. This is particularly devastating because all of the people who went from the north to the south to refuge are getting carpet bombed anyways, even though the Israeli forces told them that they would be safe if they evacuated to the south. People who are fleeing from Khan Yunis are going to the Rafah border, but now the UN is saying that they don't have any resources to take care of those displaced people, which is an additional 100,000 people now at the Rafah border estimated to not have any resources or help. The Israeli army has also now completely surrounded the Jabalia refugee camp. They say that the refugee camp is terrorist infrastructure. Palestine updates for the day. A lot happened, so buckle up. Israeli forces are claiming that since October 7th, they have dropped 10,000 airstrikes. This is equivalent to 1 airstrike per 220 people in a very saturated area. In the past 3 days, receiving aid through the Rafah border has been significantly hindered. This is because of the telecommunications blackout in December 4th and the bombing that has occurred in and around the area of the Rafah border. An increasing number of staff are unable to even get to the area because of the bombardment damage. Many already displaced people tried to go to the Rafah border, but the Rafah border was too oversaturated. Streets are now overcrowded with displaced people. People are trying to find food and water, and this is while they have no access to either. The health situation is also collapsing as a little over 60% of the hospitals are not even operating. The family of an Al Jazeera correspondent was also completely wiped out. 21 members of his family, including his parents, his siblings, wives and spouses, their children, were all completely wiped out in an airstrike that left their home into a crater. The situation has gotten so bad that the UN has done an extremely rare move, and they have invoked Article 99, one of the most powerful tools at his disposal to try to help the humanitarian disaster that's happening in Gaza, so we'll see if it works. Make sure to share, use your voice, and I will come back with more updates. Here are all the Palestine updates for the day. The death toll is now 17,487, and the wounded is more than 46,000. According to U.S. pollsters, Joe Biden's approval rating of how he has been dealing with what is going on in Gaza has gone down to 35%. Al Jazeera conducted an interview of one of the people who lived in the area in which the men were taken by the IDF soldiers and stripped to their underwear. According to that interview, the viral pictures that we saw online of the men sitting in their underwear and the IDF soldiers above them were actually victims of IDF raids. At 10 a.m., the IDF raided their homes, told their wives and kids to go to the nearest hospitals, and then took the men. The IDF claims that they were Hamas militants, but the residents who live in the area are telling different news sources that they're actually just civilians. A lot of talk of a ceasefire happening in the UN, but that does not matter because the US has complete veto power. The UN can speak of any kind of ceasefire that they want to do, but so long as the US has complete veto power, they can just veto any resolution that comes forth. Rifat al-Alir, a world-renowned professor and writer, was also murdered in an Israeli airstrike yesterday. Airstrike also killed his brother, his sister, and her 4 children. Rifat wrote a poem named If I Must Die. Today I'm going to end the video with his words. If I must die, you must live to tell my story. Palestine updates for today. The death toll is now 18,205 people, with 49,645 people injured. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, the Israeli military in the past couple of hours has carried out 19 horrific massacres. These all happened in both residential and shelter areas with civilians. 22 hospitals and 46 primary healthcare facilities are now completely rendered useless. Israeli officials have now detained 36 health workers, including the director of the Al-Shifa hospital. This morning, Gaza has seen about 325,000 cases of infectious diseases. According to Doctors Without Borders, the healthcare system in Gaza has completely collapsed. Raids in the West Bank continue, and in the past 24 hours, about 20 people have been arrested in West Bank raids. Rafah and Khan Yunis areas have been under intense bombing, which is incredibly worrisome because a lot of people are refuging in those areas and are as well displaced. According to the UN humanitarian agency, hundreds of men who were trying to seek refuge in the northern Gaza Strip have also been arrested. Palestine updates for today. A lot of breaking news happened, and I'm going to try to cover it all in this video. It says the US has vetoed every single resolution to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Egypt and Mauritania have invoked Resolution 377A. Today in New York, they're going to have a special session at 12 p.m. Eastern to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. If this resolution does pass, technically Israel does not have to listen to it. It's just a suggestion. But we'll see what happens. The death toll in Gaza is now 18,412, with about 50,100 people wounded. This is in addition to 25,000 children in the Gaza Strip being orphaned because of all of the airstrikes since October 7th. Viral sicknesses like meningitis, chickenpox, and upper respiratory illnesses are now running rampant in the Gaza Strip. According to the Washington Post, the white phosphorus that was used in Lebanon in early October 7th was actually American bomb. Puma has announced today that they are ending their national sponsorship of the Israeli football team after global boycotting effort. During the Hanukkah celebration at the White House last night, U.S. President Joe Biden said that Jewish people anywhere are not safe without the state of Israel. This statement has received a lot of backlash online because Zionism and the state of Israel does not represent all Jewish people around the world, as Jewish people are not a monolith. It also inherently conflates Judaism with Zionism, which we both know is not true. These are the Palestine updates for today. Death toll is now 18,608 people, with about 50,600 people wounded. Yesterday, the UN overwhelmingly voted to support a ceasefire in Gaza. This vote is unfortunately just a suggestion. Israel is more than likely not going to follow it, but it does show that the world stands with Palestine in a large majority. According to an exclusive report by Al Jazeera, the IDF soldiers raided and executed a bunch of civilians and children in a school that people were refuging at in the northern part of the Strip. The IDF soldiers reportedly took the civilians, even the children, into a separate room and executed them. The past day, the Gaza Strip has been seeing a lot of rain. 90% of the population in the Gaza Strip is now displaced. Most of them are living in tents if they're lucky to get one, and most of those tents are now getting flooded by rainwater. Israeli airstrikes also murdered 2 more journalists in the Gaza Strip within the past 24 hours. Of all the people that have been wounded in the Gaza Strip, only 1% of them have been able to leave through the Rafah border to receive aid. Palestine updates for today. Al Jazeera's bureau chief Wael Dahdu and his cameraman were hit by an airstrike this morning in the Gaza Strip. Wael Israel won the hearts of many people across the globe a little over a month ago when his family was killed by an airstrike. That includes his wife and his 2 children. Israel is one of the only journalists left in the Gaza Strip who can actually send out real-time information of what is happening, and fortunately enough, his injuries were minor and he's considered to recover quickly. His cameraman Samir Abu Daqa did not make it. According to Al Jazeera, Israeli forces blocked the medical teams from being able to reach him in time. Israeli forces have also dropped leaflets in the border of Lebanon, warning civilians who live in the area against helping Hezbollah. Last time Israel sent leaflets in Lebanon was in 2006 during the Lebanese war, so this is not good. According to a report by the UN, more than 1,500 illegal housing permits were given out to settlers in the West Bank. This was between September and December, so just in the past couple of months. These are the Palestine updates. A lot happened in the past 24 hours, so let's get into it. IDF shot and killed 3 Israeli hostages, but the way that this happened was insane. IDF soldiers saw 3 people walking out with white flags in their hands. The soldier felt threatened, so he shot 2 of them. One of them escaped and ran back into the building. Then called the commanding officer, and the commanding officer came to the site with some other soldiers. Into the building, and the hostage started pleading in Hebrew to not get killed. They proceeded to kill him, and then they claimed that they thought it was Hamas trying to pull them into a trap in the building. Because of this, Israeli citizens have started protesting in the street, also calling for a ceasefire. The indiscriminate shooting of the 3 Israeli hostages might actually lead us to some sort of a ceasefire or a pause, but we'll see. Israeli forces also started bulldozing the tents outside of a hospital that were full of sick civilians. Dozens of wounded and sick civilians were crushed with bulldozers outside of the Kamal Adwan hospital. On top of that, the southern part of the Kamal Adwan hospital has been completely destroyed, and there's still 12 newborn babies in incubators in the hospital. Medical workers have also been ordered to evacuate the hospital, but they refuse to leave their patients. This is all the while there's still a communications blackout in the Gaza Strip, so people can't even access internet properly. The 36 hospitals in the Gaza Strip, only 11 of them are operating, and some of them can't even take new patients because they don't have the capacity. The situation is getting completely out of control. Palestine updates for the day. Although phone and internet services have been partially restored in the Gaza Strip, most of the Gaza Strip still does not have access to internet. According to the UN, Gaza is the most dangerous place for a journalist to live in the world. This is because they are deliberately targeted for spreading the truth out of the Gaza Strip, and so because of the high amount of deaths surrounding the journalists in the area, it is now the most dangerous place to be in the world if you are a journalist. The UN has been receiving reports that Israel has been detaining hundreds of people in the northern Gaza Strip, and this includes more than 100 women and children. According to Al Jazeera, these people have been rounded up, detained, and they're being treated terribly, as well as being mass executed. The executions of the detained people in the northern Gaza Strip are reportedly happening at schools where people are refuging at. Health officials tried to host a press conference at the Al Adwan hospital to inform the public of what is happening, but they were shot at and they had to run and duck for cover. Israeli bombardments also continue in the Khan Yunis area and other places where people are just refuging at. Sign updates for today. We have updated numbers on total devastation that happened in the Gaza Strip, and we're gonna go through it one by one. 25,612 people are now dead, including the people presumed to be stuck under rubble who will not be able to get saved in time. 52,031 injuries in total. 89 journalists have been killed since October 7th. That means on some days, more than 1 journalist has been killed. 1.85 million people have now been displaced. The population in the Gaza Strip is a little over 2 million, so we can assume that most of the people in the Gaza Strip are totally displaced at this point. 634,000 housing units have been completely destroyed, and 173,000 units have been partially destroyed. 147 press headquarters have been either damaged or completely destroyed. 1,441 destroyed industrial facilities. 156 mosques have been damaged, and 4 churches have been damaged. 473 health staff have been targeted. From the targeted health staff, 222 have died and 251 have been injured. On top of that, 125 health facilities have been targeted. This includes 23 hospitals, 56 clinics, and 46 ambulances. Palestine updates for today. According to Doctors Without Borders, the Al-Alda hospital has been completely taken over by the IDF soldiers. The IDF soldiers reportedly took men as young as 16 years old outside of the hospital and bounded them, stripped them, also interrogated them. This is all the while the Al-Alda hospital still has dozens of patients, including children, who are in critical need of medical care inside. The US is now leading the Red Sea Task Force against the Yemeni Houthis with some other allied countries. This is in response to the Yemeni Houthis saying that they were going to attack any commercial boats from Israel that tried to pass, and people are really scared that this is going to further escalate the tensions in the Middle East for obvious reasons. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, there were about 17 massacres done yesterday alone. 214 people were killed as a result of these attacks and 300 people were injured. Biden continues to flunk in the polls as only 38% of people said that they trust him over Donald Trump on how he has dealt with Palestine. Of the people who took the poll, the young voters, which Joe Biden heavily relies on, were the most angry. So that's not good. For the ending of this video, I want to read this headline by Al Jazeera that really stuck to me. Doctors stepping over bodies of dead children to treat other children who will die anyways. Palestine updates for today. We are still waiting on a resolution from the UN Security Council, which has been delayed for 2 days. The US is more than likely going to veto the resolution, but we'll see what happens. The Palestinian Red Crescent is saying that they are unable to reach the wounded in the northern Gaza region. Rescue along with medical teams are unable to reach them, so that means the people who are stuck under rubble and or wounded within the northern part of the Gaza Strip are more than likely going to die. There are 35 hospitals in the Gaza Strip and 27 of them are not operating. Out of the 72 primary care clinics, 52 of them are not operating, which means 75% of the primary care clinics are now completely non-operational. The Gaza death toll has now officially risen to 20,000 people. That means 8,000 of them are children and 6,200 of them are women, all of which civilian. The Rafah region of the Gaza Strip, for every square kilometer, there is 12,000 people refugee. For reference, 3 square kilometers equals 1 square mile, which means for every square mile, there is about 36,000 people refugee in the Rafah region. According to the UNRWA shelters are recording 360,000 infectious cases. This includes respiratory diseases, meningitis, and chickenpox. Palestine updates for today. A lot happened, so let's get into it. There are no more functioning hospitals in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. The ambulance center in the Jabalia area was raided by IDF soldiers. Medical crews and the paramedics were abducted and no one really knew where they went. According to the Palestinian Red Crescent, the Israeli forces actually ended up torturing all of them. Washington Post released a bombshell report proving that there was no command center in the Al-Shifa hospital. This report proved that those claims were completely false and a lie, and what's even worse about this is that Joe Biden lied to the whole entire public, saying that there was a command center underneath the Al-Shifa hospital when there never was one. Israeli military also says that they are in the final stages of taking over all of northern Gaza, but they have a track record of lying about almost everything, so we'll have to see how true that is. Israeli settlers have now also uprooted dozens of olive trees in the occupied West Bank. Not only did settlers reportedly uproot all of these olive trees, but the Israeli government would also protect them when the Palestinians would try to come back and go back to their land. After multiple days of delays, the UN Security Council finally voted to upscale the humanitarian aid going into the Gaza Strip. US and Russia abstained during this vote, and currently the UN has the track record of being incredibly useless when it comes to helping Palestinian people, so we'll see if this actually ends up doing anything. These are the Palestine updates for the day. In the past 24 hours, at least 201 Palestinians were killed. 368 Palestinians were injured. That brings the exact death toll up to 20,258 and 53,688 people injured. According to the UN Secretary General Guterres, 4 of the 5 hungriest people in the world are currently in Gaza. According to Al Jazeera, a lot of dead bodies are decomposing in the streets in a city called Bet Lahia in the Gaza Strip. Most of these bodies are from people that were executed and their bodies were just left, and apparently dogs were also going through the bodies as well. This was one of the many Israeli massacres that happened, and we do have documentation that these kinds of executions did did take place. As Israeli forces are attempting to clear the Jabalia area of the northern Gaza Strip, fighters are waiting to ambush the Israeli forces. Despite everything happening in the Gaza Strip right now, the Palestinian fighters are still holding up intense resistance against Israeli forces from occupying and taking over the Jabalia area. The toll for journalists is now up to 99 people, which means since the start of October 7th, on some days more than one journalist was targeted and killed. These are the Palestine updates for today. The UN estimates that there is about 50,000 pregnant women currently trapped in the Gaza Strip. This means every single day it's estimated that 180 women are giving birth to their children. Prior to October 7th, there were 22 UNRWA health centers available for pregnant women to go to, but now there are only 7 operational ones. The 7 clinics that are left are being used for women who have at-risk pregnancies. 142 UN workers have been killed in the Gaza Strip. According to the UN, in most cases, it wasn't just the workers that died, it was also their whole entire family as well. Of the 36 hospitals in the Gaza Strip, only 9 are partially operating now. Of the 9 that are partially operating, they are at full capacity and they're having a very hard time functioning. Journalist death toll has now gone up to 103. Israeli forces also raided Bethlehem the day before Christmas. It wasn't just Bethlehem, it was multiple other areas in the occupied West Bank, but they raided Bethlehem before Christmas. Today is Christmas Eve and tomorrow is Christmas Day, and although we have the privilege to be able to hang out with our families and friends or just be able to celebrate in peace, understand that many others around the world do not have that privilege. As you take a break these couple of days during the holidays, just remember that there's still an ongoing genocide happening in the Middle East. These are the Palestine updates for the day. On Christmas Day, Israeli forces stormed and raided the city Bethlehem, which is where Jesus was born. The raids didn't just happen in Bethlehem, they happened across the occupied West Bank. The day before Christmas, Israeli forces targeted a 600-year-old monastery in the south of Lebanon. Last night on Christmas Eve, there was a huge massacre. They set airstrikes to a refugee camp in Maghazi in the central part of Gaza, and they murdered a lot of people. Most of the people who died from this airstrike were women and children, and unfortunately, all of the routes for ambulances to be able to go and enter into that area were bombed as well. As a result of the Maghazi massacre, 7 family names are completely gone. Every single person from 7 different family names were massacred. On Christmas Day, in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, around 800,000 people do not have access to any kind of health care. Southern Gaza, the hospitals are now at 350% capacity. Around 900,000 children in shelters are at risk of dehydration and starvation. Sign updates for today. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, in the past 24 hours, 241 people were killed and 382 people were injured. Total death toll is now at 20,915 people, about 56,000 people injured. Yesterday, Israeli forces killed a high-ranking commander in the IRGC, otherwise known as the Iranian military. Iran does not usually directly get involved into wars. They fund people like Hezbollah, the Houthis, or Hamas. They don't directly get involved, but the Iranian government has also warned that they're going to retaliate. Depending on their retaliation, this could heavily escalate everything in the matter of seconds, but we'll have to see what happens. Half of Gaza's population is now starving. 9 out of 10 people have gone without food for at least more than a day. This is 100% preventable if they would just allow aid to go into the Gaza Strip, but they're not allowing aid to go in, so people are starving. People in Rafah are now also starving and they are displaced. So humanitarian aid workers are handing out food. They're saying that it's not nearly enough for the amount of displaced people that need nourishment. Telecommunications has also been severed once again in the Gaza Strip, therefore Wi-Fi and communication may be a bit delayed until they can figure that out. In the past couple of days, the occupied West Bank has also been seeing an immense amount of raids. These are the Palestine updates for the day. President of Turkey said in a statement that he believes there is no difference between Benjamin Netanyahu and Adolf Hitler, which has pissed off Netanyahu, and now he won't stop talking about it. Every single day that passes, the food insecurity and hunger becomes worse and worse. 17% of the current Gaza population is considered to be in catastrophic hunger level. 42% is currently in extreme hunger levels. This means that more than half of the population is either under current or catastrophic levels of hunger. Since October 7th, there have been 367 Israeli settler attacks. According to the UN, these settler attacks continue to happen in the occupied West Bank, which is why it's so important for us to not just focus on Gaza when we're talking about Palestine, but also the occupied West Bank as well. Updated figures on total total devastation. 21,110 people have been killed altogether. 15,100 of them were children and women, and 3,111 of them were medical staff. 92 schools and universities are completely destroyed, and that is along with 65,000 houses that are either completely destroyed or just totally unsafe to live in. Of about the 21,000 total deaths, that means around 18,000 of them were either women, children, or medical staff. Palestine updates for today. On Christmas, there were multiple attacks on the Maghazi refugee camp, which people started calling the Maghazi massacre because 7 family names were completely wiped out, along with many people dying and losing, loved ones. Today, Al Jazeera is reporting that there are even more airstrikes happening at the Maghazi refugee camp. We don't know exactly what the numbers are, but it's looking like it's pretty bad. According to Al Jazeera, the current situation in the northern part of the Gaza Strip is looking pretty bad, where people are really starting to go through starvation. This is preventable if they would just allow aid to go through the borders, but unfortunately they're not allowing any aid to go through the borders, so this starvation is just going to become worse and worse by the day. The total death toll is now 21,320 people, along with around 54,000 people injured. The Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, which is one of the 9 hospitals that are partially operating now without 80% of their medical staff. This is because of 2 reasons. Some of the medical staff was murdered in airstrikes, but also getting to the hospital has become so unsafe and unattainable that medical staff just can't get to the hospital. In the next coming days, Arab nations are going to be sitting down and trying to figure out how to call for a ceasefire. I do think this is a very performative move because up until now, they haven't really done anything constructive to advocate for a ceasefire, but we'll see what happens. Palestine updates for today. South Africa is officially going after Israel in the International Court of Justice. South Africa is saying that this is because Israel is going against the UN's Genocide Convention. Members of the UN, including both South Africa and Israel, are held up to the standards of the International Court of Justice by paper. Whether they're actually going to be held accountable is a completely different story. According to a Human Rights Monitor reported by Al Jazeera, ground soldiers have been looting Palestinian homes. Beyond the illegal raids and arrests that have been happening, Israeli forces have actually been stealing a lot of personal items that is owned by Palestinian people. Money, jewelry, gold, any kind of laptops and electronics have all been recorded to be stolen. Tens of millions of dollars of stolen items. The raids in the West Bank are continuing to happen, and as of yesterday, an 18-year-old boy was killed by Israeli forces. According to 10 medical workers that were arrested and taken into custody by Israeli forces, said that they were blindfolded, handcuffed, and they were also tortured for the duration of 5 to 10 days. This included both physical and emotional, beaten and or physically harmed, as well as emotional, which involved humiliation. These were all medical workers. Medical workers. Not Hamas, medical workers. As of today, there's about 29,000 people that are missing and or officially dead, and 7,000 people that are under rubble, which forces cannot get to. Palestine updates for today. In a press conference, Netanyahu vowed that he's going to continue the war for many months to come with no end in sight. 1.5 million people in the Gaza Strip are now officially homeless. The total population is a little over 2 million, so it's fair to say that about 75% of the whole entire population in Gaza is homeless. The Biden administration is moving forward with what they're calling emergency funding for Israel, which includes $147 million of potential arms sale to the country. This specific move allows Biden to bypass any kind of congressional votes and to just give Israel the money. Since he's flunking in the polls, he hasn't really made this complete public knowledge, leaving many people in the public in the dark. Not only is 40% of the population in the Gaza Strip at risk of famine now, there is around 50,000 pregnant women who are about to go into starvation. I want to stress that this could be completely preventable if they would just allow aid to go into the Strip. 100,000 displaced people have now moved into the Rafah region. Out of the 36 hospitals that are in the Gaza Strip, only 13 of them are operating now. They're all partially functioning, with 4 of them in the north side and 9 of them in the south side. Palestine updates for today. The statement that the White House released, one of the accomplishments that they listed was supporting democracy abroad and at home, listing that their support of Ukraine and Israel was an accomplishment accomplishment for 2023. According to the Gaza media office, 28,822 people have either been killed or are missing. In the past 85 days, they have also recorded 1,825 massacres done by the Israeli military towards the Palestinian people. Of the 28,000 figure that I just listed, 9,100 of them are children. This is the largest amount of Palestinians that have been killed since the 1948 Nakba. Israeli forces continue to raid the occupied West Bank, and yesterday there were at least 16 people that were arrested as a result of these raids. So as a result of Israeli bombardment, about 70% of homes in Gaza have been completely destroyed. Exact figure is still being tallied right now, but they're estimating that it's around 300,000 to 450,000. Please make sure to like, comment, and share, and I'll be back tomorrow with more updates.